So one of the big stories surrounding UFC 244, both in the MMA space, but then also in the more general space, was the fact that Donald Trump went to the event. It was the first time that a sitting president went to an MMA event, let alone obviously a UFC event, given that UFC is an MMA. So what was interesting about that was a lot of the attention that it brought. To me, one of the things I talk about is that as hardcore fans, we're pretty much going to watch MMA regardless, especially at the highest levels. But where the money is really made for the UFC and where it's really made for the sport in general is when you're able to get more of a casual audience in. So things like this, where you can take someone like the president of the United States, have him come there and have there be a lot of coverage around it, it definitely draws a lot of casual interest, which is definitely something I appreciate. A lot of the stories are kind of like the one right here with ESPN, which I think they took from the Associated Press, which was just talking about the reaction. I don't really think that the reaction matters all that much. You could argue with it being MMA, and a lot of MMA fans, tending to lean right, that you would expect him to get cheered. You could argue that because it's in New York and New York's a blue state, that you would expect him to get booed. It seemed like it was a mixed reaction. It seemed like depending on where you were in the crowd, if you were in a section that was booing him more so, then it would sound as though he was getting loudly booed. If you were in a section that was cheering him more, then it would sound as though he was getting loudly cheered. It was a loud reaction. It was just depending on where you were. I guess as far as perspective goes, it would either be considered loud boos or loud cheers. But I've seen videos that seem to indicate it going both ways. But quite frankly, I don't really know that matters all that much. To me, the bigger story is that you have a sitting president actually going to an MMA event and getting a lot of coverage around that. And to me, while it seems kind of small, yes, it's Donald Trump. Yeah, the UFC is sort of like an established sport at this point. If you think about other sports that are trying to build themselves up in the way the UFC did, and the UFC again, this is a sport that started back in 1993, or at least the UFC started back in 1993. So for them to be where they're at today, where they have a sitting president attending, where they're making billions of dollars, it's definitely something that I enjoy, and it's definitely something that shouldn't be taken for granted. It wouldn't have been all that shocking had the UFC decided after losing like 30, 40, $50 million that they just close up and the sport of MMA just wouldn't be where it is today. So you definitely have to appreciate that. You have to appreciate milestones like this, because while it's fun to think about fighter pay and think about how hard these guys work and how much work they put in and the amount of money they make, just because you work hard, particularly in a sport, it doesn't mean that you're going to make decent money or even like make enough to make a living and make it your full-time job. There are plenty of athletes in wrestling who work their ass off and don't make very much money doing it. Plenty of people who in Muay Thai who do that, who work their ass off, don't make a whole lot of money on it. Guys who work their ass off in jiu-jitsu don't make a lot of money off of it. But in MMA, because of companies like the UFC and because of all the success they've had, if you can make it into the UFC and if you can fight like 3 times a year, chances are you're going to make enough where you can just make your living just being a fighter. And to me, that's a good thing. Obviously, we'd like to see there be more money in the sport as time goes on and for fighters to make more. But I think the growth of the UFC has been really important. And having something like this happen where you have the president coming in, you draw a lot of casual attention. You're bringing in even more money. It seems as though this event did pretty well for them. All in all, I see it as a good thing. And whether you line up on the right or the left on this, even if you hate Trump, I think you have to appreciate the fact that as a sitting president, he decided to go to an event here and show some support for it. To follow up on that point, I'm not particularly a big fan of Andrew Yang or Tulsi Gabbard. Both of them have spoken out about how much they enjoy the martial arts. So here you have a story about Andrew Yang talking about how he does jiu-jitsu. It looks like there was a bit of an ad there that came up. I'll pull it back. But Andrew Yang, he does jiu-jitsu. He has his kids in jiu-jitsu. And to me, assuming that's Andrew Yang won the Democratic nomination, got to the White House, even if I didn't agree with all of his policies, if he were to be going to MMA events, if he were to go to this is really annoying, BJJ fanatics, if he were to go to some jiu-jitsu events and really show a lot of support for those sports, I think it'd be great for both sports. It'd be good for MMA for him to be around the fights. It'd be good for jiu-jitsu for him to be going around. It'd be cool if he like started bringing in like some top black belts to like help train with them. Sort of in a way like what you see with the ADCC, where you have a Saudi prince who runs what's effectively a charity. Although I think this year they broke even with ADCC, where they're getting a lot of the best competitors out in the world and getting them to compete. And then the guys who do really well there, he tends to bring them in and have like private lessons. It'd be kind of cool if you had like Andrew Yang doing private lessons with like Paul Meow or Gordon Ryan. So I think that'd actually be kind of unique if that happened. So just to touch on this story before I move on. So here it looks like he's at, I think that's the Unity sign. So I think he was at Unity in New York, which is a big gym out there. Dylan Dennis trains there. Eddie Cummings trains there. Paul Meow, Murillo Santana. So it looks like this was like his kid's first day training there. So again, that's pretty cool. So granted, Yang probably isn't going to end up becoming president, but if he did, I think it'd be good for the sport to have his presence in both jiu-jitsu, but then also MMA. So I think that could be a good thing. Tulsi Gabbard, same thing. She seems to be really into MMA. Has this video here where she was doing some, I guess we could call it like a light sparring. It's effectively like a warm-up here. But she was working with Wei Li Jiang after she helped her get into the country. So Gabbard's right here. So even if it's a president you don't particularly like, I think the idea of having someone with that kind of office, in a way legitimizing the sport, attending the sport, drawing some attention to it that wouldn't otherwise be there, be it from a political crowd, I definitely appreciate it. And I think it's a good thing to have. So for me, happy to see Donald Trump at the show. It seems as though he has a good relationship with Dana White, has some sort of relationship with Colby Covington. I don't know whether or not he's going to be going to UFC 245. But you figure somewhere down the line he'll probably be going to one of Colby's fights. This probably won't be the last time that we see him at a UFC event while he's a sitting president. So to me, the more often he can come around, the better. Can definitely bring some opportunities for other fighters to get a spotlight here. For the fighters that were fighting on this card and were able to take advantage of a lot of the casual attention that was brought in because Trump was there. I really hope that they were able to build off of it and work off of it. I think Jorge Masvidal is going to see an even bigger spike in his popularity beyond what he's already had. This has just been a great year for him, and for him to top it off with the win against Nate Diaz, and then get a shout out from the president afterwards. I think it's great for him. So all in all, pretty happy that we're having presidential candidates who are into the sport. We have a current president who's into the sport. And to me, whether or not you like that specific president, I think having them there and being able to draw in a casual audience is definitely worthwhile. And Epstein didn't kill himself.